This is the Barry Richards Show. WBSM On Demand.
Without further ado,
Broadcasting live from the WBSM studios and streaming worldwide on the WBSM app. This is the Barry Richards Show. All viewpoints are welcome. Exercise your freedom of speech by calling 508-996-0500. Read Barry's latest articles at WBSM.com and on the WBSM app. Now, New Bedford's talk radio king, Barry Richards.
Hour two of the Barry Richards Show. Brian in for Barry today. We heard Skylar with the weather, scattered showers into the overnight. And the pitter-patter is coming down again. You know, I was just looking in the parking lot. We have some dry spots and then some puddle activity where, you know, you can tell that it's raining. And I'm thinking, well, how do we have puddle activity right here? And maybe, you know, if I'm looking at a football field, maybe 2 yards away from that puddle, it's dry. How does that happen? The quote of the day from billionaire Charlie Munger. The world is not driven by greed. It's driven by envy. And during the first hour, actually first 45 minutes or so of the show, we talked about, despite all of life's improvements over the past couple of centuries, many people are miserable. Now, does many mean more than half of us? Not necessarily, but it doesn't mean less than half of us. It means many people here in the United States in particular, our basic needs are being met. And yet, we want more. How do you like it? How do you like it? And when we don't get it, we get upset. And we get upset at others because they seem to get their hands on something that we don't get. Classic example would be food stamps. When you hear that, no, I'm not even going to scratch food stamp. Just scratch it, please. All right. I'm going to talk about education because we, the taxpayers, pay for the education, for government school education, the monopoly education. And when you have people that come into the United States illegally, improperly, and then you find out that they get the educational system along with a few other things. Please don't get me wrong. I don't want to neglect the others, but I think I can pinpoint it more precisely when we talk about education, because you know that there's that obligation, so to speak, to educate the people. Your money has to educate the people. Okay, I want to get back to the phone lines and take your calls on this. And there are a couple of other things that I want to bring up. Do you realize, and Adam brought it up during the news, that the legislature is bent over backwards to see if they can expand and increase the bottle bill. Increase by what? You know, from 5 cents to 10 cents. Okay, there's your increase. Expand, include nip bottles, include all kinds of things. Government at work. Don't you feel? I feel scared. Hello.
Yeah. Good afternoon, Brian. How
Good
you doing?
afternoon. Winging and wanging.
Very good.
Actually, I'm fantabulous. Thank you for asking.
That's very good. You know, I was watching C-SPAN 2, and it's either C-SPAN 2, C-SPAN 3. Pretty much lines up with what you've been talking about. The Dems, according to the panel at the Calvin Coolidge Institute, and they were talking about the same thing we're talking about right now. And the Dems have been peddling this envy, greed, and entitlement for a long time. And if we look at it, the Federal Reserve with quantitative easing and corporate bailouts, stimulus, multi-installments of stimulus, bad government policy, overtaxation, overregulation, out-of-control spending. Going back to, they were talking about President Wilson. And President Wilson and Harding, the federal tax rate was 77%. And then when Calvin Coolidge came into office, Republican, by the way, served 2 terms in Massachusetts, and he reduced that to 25%. So he reduced the tax rate from 77% to 25%, and he reduced regulations because he felt the government at the time was meddling too much in the private sector. So he reduced regulation, he reduced the taxes, let the government get out of the way so that private enterprise could thrive and the economy can do well, and it did under him. And then President Hoover came in. Now, President Hoover, he increased the tax rate to 63%, and he increased the spending, government spending, 30%. And then when he got out of office, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, this was during the beginnings of the Great Depression, he increased the tax rate to 79%. And he increased the size of government, and spending under him went up to 90% from Hoover's 63% to 90%. So he actually...
So wait a minute. I'm listening to this. If it's 90%,
yes,
does that mean that the people that were working only got 10% of their pay?
Yeah, well, 79% is what they were being taxed.
Then you're only getting 21% of your pay.
Because if you look at it, Brian, all those government programs that he had to try to alleviate the burden on people and the suffering, in the end, actually, it increased their suffering.
It prolonged, and this is what I'm getting at. It prolonged what became the Depression. The Depression doesn't end until a couple of weeks after the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor.
Right. So it was due to high taxes, runaway spending, bad federal policy that contributed to it. And a previous caller said it, if our economy is going to get out of the tank, and you need innovation and creativity, which I agree, human freedom, is when old companies are replaced by new companies through innovation. This whole thing with corporate bailouts is not what the government's all about.
I'm sorry. It is what the government's all about. It may not be what it's supposed to be about, but that's what it's become. I do appreciate your call. Thank you very much. Let's continue. Hello.
Yeah, Brian. I want to talk about paying sales tax on medications here in Massachusetts and why I think we should have health care be tax deductible. But your previous caller is correct, but there's a misunderstanding. When FDR raised taxes to 90%, that was over a certain amount of money. All right, let's say you earned more than $100,000. Everything over that would be taxed at 90%.
There weren't too many people making $100,000 back then.
Ding, ding, ding. And FDR in 1934 cut military spending 40%, so angering General Douglas MacArthur that he resigned and moved to the Philippines. This is how dangerous FDR and the Democrats were. There were more people on public welfare in 1938 than in 1933.
Well, that stands to that stands to reason because it progressed.
Well, everything FDR and the Democrats did was a complete failure. When they introduced Social Security in 1935, hundreds of thousands of people lost their jobs because the employer could not make up the 6% that FDR was taking away from the employer the matching rate. So they just shut down. And the Democrats didn't even care.
No, because they figured out how to get a stronghold into government. Remember, at that particular time, Republicans, leading up to that, Republicans controlled the day in Congress and back and forth with the presidency. So now all of a sudden the Democrats were getting that stronghold that they've had basically since, let's say, mid-1930s.
Right.
So there is there's a reason why they fell in lockstep. And remember, it took until Newt Gingrich for the Republicans to gain control of the House of Representatives. Yeah. We're talking decades.
FDR was so bad, he would whip out of his butt what the existing price of gold would be, and he also had the Agricultural Adjustment Act that was so bad, Brian, that farmers, dairy farmers were destroying milk.
They were dumping their milk. Oh, I remember, yeah. I remember seeing the pictures.
World War II broke out, Brian, 10% of the men who were denied entry into the military was because of malnutrition from the years previous.
Yeah.
FDR was terrible. Anybody with a half a brain cell would see this. But
they don't see it. They don't see it.
Yeah, I know. You and I, if we sat out in a chair in New Bedford and asked people, we might get 3 people that understood. But regarding Massachusetts, now I need over-the-counter antihistamines and that. I have to pay a sales tax for this medication, Brian. If I get a prescription, there's no sales tax. But
Correct.
If you buy toothpaste, toothbrushes, Band-Aids, other medical needs, and even food supplements, you have to pay a sales tax. What the hell is that, Brian? Are we in a Democrat state or not? I mean, I should be able to deduct my medical expenses off my taxes, but for some reason, can't do that in Massachusetts, Brian.
So, I don't know. So I'm asking this as a question. It seems to me that other states that have a sales tax, that they also tax those products.
But if you're a big Democrat liberal, do you not want to have a right of health care? You can't tax a right, otherwise it ain't a right. So, yet they are taxing it, and you can't deduct it. Yeah, isn't that crazy?
I wonder if you order your medications. Well, medications, it doesn't matter because they're not RX. But if you order the other stuff from a state that doesn't tax it, are you still taxed?
To the best of my knowledge, yes, which is a violation of the Interstate Commerce Clause. You cannot put a tax on articles coming in from out of state. But yet here in Massachusetts, they do that. But again, where's President Biden and Kamala Harris? If health care is a right, shouldn't it be tax deductible or not taxed at all?
I think that's a slippery slope.
No, it isn't. I'm just saving my health so that I can earn money to pay taxes.
I get that part, but when government, any government, I'm not pointing the finger at the Biden administration, any government gets their foot in the door on healthcare, whether it's a tax credit, a tax, any kind of break, all of a sudden you've got the rules and regulations that are going to be, piles of mountains of paper to fill out. So I see a zero-sum game.
It's just strange though. Why are you taxing me for my antihistamines, whereas if I got it a prescription, it wouldn't be? Duh. Where's the sense there?
Yeah, I hear you. I guess it means move to Wyoming.
All right then, Brian.
All right, thank you. I appreciate the call. 508-996-0500. AAA. They came out with their weekly what's going on with gasoline thing, AAA in southern New England. The average price of a gallon of petrol, 7 cents more this week than last week. Now, I have to admit, it does seem that the price is a little bit higher outside of our area, when we look at the average for the state, the average price this past week, $3.74. The week prior, $3.67. So a difference of 7 cents. Last year at this time, we were shelling out 438 pennies, or $4.38 for regular unleaded gasoline. Talk about highway ripoff. One of the things that I wanted to throw in today, because we've talked about it before, and most of the time, your response has been, no, let's not go down that particular road. Maybe things have changed now that the city of New Bedford is instituting a ban on nip bottles. Is it time for the Commonwealth to expand on the bottle bill? So as it stands right now, bottles and cans, soda cans, beer cans, and a few other type cans and bottles, you have to put a 5-cent deposit down, and you get that deposit back when you return the bottle. Well, there are bills, plural, bills on Beacon Hill that are out to not only extend what can be part of the bottle bill, let's call it, but also increase. So instead of a nickel per container, it would go up to 10 cents per container. I don't think this is a good move. I think that there are many people here in the Commonwealth that do. What's troubling, really troubling, is I can see the legislature passing it this time around and Governor Healy signing on the dotted line. And I don't know that it solves a litter problem. I don't know how many people are going to buy those particular containers anymore. I get scared each and every time governments move to try to solve a problem that they either created themselves before or really don't have any business trying to resolve. I drive. Okay, Brian, the cab driver, gets around. But I also drive outside of our area here. And do I see litter? I do. Many times I see litter on highways, in the little gullies. I often wonder how it got there, but it's there. Whether people are throwing stuff out of their car windows, or it's blowing from a garbage can whose lid wasn't on tight. Seagulls got at it, started picking at the French fries, and then didn't like all the other stuff and just let it go, and it landed wherever. Litter is all over the place. Does it include nip bottles? Yes, it does. Are nip bottles the overwhelming majority of the litter? No, not the litter that I'm looking at. And maybe I'm blind to the point that nip bottles are the biggest culprit of litter out there, and that people that buy nips are the ones that are just winging them out the window of their car and littering the streets. Maybe I am that blind to it. But as I mentioned on Brian's Beat this past Saturday, when I was coming in to the station, I was going through downtown like I do each and every Saturday when I'm coming in to the station. And at the base of Union, so right near Route 18, there was a a couple of piles of litter on the streets. I saw one nip bottle in that pile. I saw paper plates, styrofoam cups, all kinds of stuff kind of swept into an area. Now, one caller stated that, well, maybe the city hasn't had a chance to pick it up yet. And that could be true. Could be very, very true. My comeback to that would be whomever's putting on the event, like the folks, the feast organizers put on their feast, eventually they're responsible for making sure that area is all cleaned up, or they pay somebody to do it. It would be the same, whomever is responsible for the event that took place in downtown on Friday evening. They should be responsible. I shouldn't be driving at any time in the morning on a Saturday and seeing that pile of litter. I digress, because the point is there was only one nip bottle, and of all the other things that could be under a 10-cent deposit now, that nip bottle would be the only item there. Paper plates, you're not going to put a deposit down on one paper plate. You're not going to put a deposit down on one plastic cup or one, what do you call it? Kind of cups do you call those? They're not plastic, but kind of cardboardish. You know, those type of cups. You're not gonna put a deposit down on them. So, what gets resolved here? What gets resolved? How are you stopping the litter? You're not. And yet, this is what the legislature thinks needs to be done. Now, I would tell you, vote them out. And maybe you would, but the majority of people aren't doing that. So this is what we have to put up. You wonder why Massachusetts is the 5th highest state for a mass exodus. This is part of the reason. Never mind the millionaire tax, which is just an add-on to already a 5+% income tax that we have here. But all the stupid rules and regulations that are going on, this is what drives people to leave the state. 508-996-0500. Thank you for your patience. Hello.
Good afternoon, Brian.
Good afternoon, Brian.
I think the bigger problem is the lottery tickets on the ground. And if money from the lottery is coming back to states, they should allot some amount of some percentage of that money coming back to states to clean up the streets for all the dirty lottery tickets. Has anyone ever thought of that?
I've heard people say it before, so yes, it's been thought of. But here's the thing. The state is not going to take the money that they've already gotten a hold of and use it because you want the streets cleaned. Do I think it's a good idea? Yes, I do. Do I think the legislature would vote to do something like that? Absolutely not.
No, I guess you're right, but that's just something, nips are not the only pollution on the streets, and that was just my thought. I see a lot more lottery tickets than I see nips, so maybe if they give a 5-cent ticket and people start picking up tickets, maybe the streets will be a little bit cleaner. Just my thought.
So in other words, if I see a ticket sub, since I don't buy lottery tickets, or very rarely do I buy them, if I were to see one on the street and I pick it up, I could redeem it at the lottery somehow?
Yeah, wouldn't that be like a 5-cent redemption, kind of like a bottle redemption?
Again, I think that's a great idea. Why not? Why not? Yeah, if nothing else, that should make the person who bought the ticket want to redeem it, because if they get 20 tickets at 5 cents a pop, they can get another free ticket.
There's $1 right there.
Yeah.
Right, exactly.
Good thinking, man.
Just my thought.
All right, I like it. I do.
Thank you.
Let us continue. Hello. Yes.
Good afternoon, Brian.
Yes, it's Brian.
No. I ran into that flag guy at the feast.
Yeah? What'd you say to him?
I asked him how he's doing with the Confederate flag.
And he said?
He said, I've been doing this for 25 years. And I go to 4 different states between here and Ohio, I think. He said, I never had one complaint, except for here. Not an issue. I'm calling about the education thing. I heard, I happened to stumble onto, I think it was the Speaker of the House was on the morning show over here today.
I'll take your word for it. I didn't hear it, so...
Yeah, I think it was the Speaker of the... no, not the House, the Senate.
Karen Spilka?
Karen Spilka?
She's the Senate president.
She is?
Yes.
I think it was a guy.
Mike Rodericks?
I think maybe that was it. He was
on with Chris and Marcus.
Yeah. Was he the Speaker of the Senate?
He is the head of the Ways
House
and
Means in the Senate.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
But anyway, you were going to say?
Yeah, he was talking about education and community colleges and state colleges and stuff, and he was lamenting the fact that they're so expensive these days, maybe even prohibitively so. He was kind of like leaning towards something like that. And I thought a lot of the cost of the public education these days was attributable to the amount of overhead they carry, the staffing. Is that not correct?
I don't know why you would think otherwise.
Yeah. So...
Why, did he say something different?
No. But he was lamenting the cost of public education up one side and down the other. He never mentioned the fact that it's because of all the people that they put there in...
Sure. And, part of the reason why they have so many other people is because even within education and the funding that you get courtesy of the taxpayers...
Yes.
That means red tape and paperwork that has to be filled out, and so you have to hire even more people to fill out that paperwork.
And then he was talking about so after he failed to allude to the actual cost of the actual causes of the high cost of education, then he moved right on to saying, well, we need to give the illegal aliens free education as well. As long as they've had 3 years of high school.
That's included in the bill.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So at the same time they need to admit that their costs are so high. They're going to build more causes for the education cost to go so high. And not only that, but if you look at it, it's kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy. They stack the Department of Education or the universities, colleges, whatever they are. They stack them so heavily that it drives the cost up. And I always say, got to make sure we keep all of our friends paid. Let's make programs to put more students in there, and we'll pay for them. So it all comes out of the tax fund. You see what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean. I've been sitting here saying this kind of stuff for years, and it seems to fly over the cuckoo's nest.
They built the top heaviness of it, like a battleship or something. They build all the superstructure, and then they say, well, it's kind of sinking in the ocean, so we need to fix the ocean to keep the superstructure up by adding the payment for illegal. I think they look at the illegal aliens as something to the effect of they could care less whether they went to school or not, but they look at them as a vehicle to support their juggernaut of public patronage.
Absolutely. They are butts in the seats, and butts in the seats equals money.
Yeah. And before he even got on to this, excuse me, he mentioned that, we're having a problem with how many young people we're actually keeping in Massachusetts. You drive them all out of the state. If somebody's just coming out of high school or something like that, and they look at the situation around here with taxes and everything else, they're like, hey, I'm out of here. I'll go join the military or I'll go to another state. They have nothing tying them in, so to speak.
Oh, you're absolutely right. Thanks for your call. I'm going to go to a break, and I see you there. I'll get to you in a second. But just to go to that guy's point, my youngest son has decided that he's going to move to Rhode Island because the cost of living here in Massachusetts is too freaking high. Okay, the phony is sitting in for Barry today. Barry will be back from his trip out to the Berkshires for tomorrow's show. Let's get on it. Let's hear from you. Hello.
Hi, Brian.
Hey, Brian.
You know, we're living in a new mentality in this country. And the litter bug thing, the nips ain't about children. It's about adults throwing them around. Unless the package store's selling the kids liquor bottle of nips. But my idea is let's have an icon, the litter bug. Just like you got the guy Wally the Green Monster at Fenway and all these other characters. And the litter bug comes around. And if he sees you picking up some trash or something, he gives you $20. He's the litter bug, just in a costume. And he hands out bumper stickers and stuff like that. And he's...
Wait a minute, the bumper
like
stickers will end up on the ground.
I hope so, because that's where everything goes. You know, everything, waste material, everything ends up on the ground. It's called gravity. And the thing is, it's a grave situation. So if you got 10 of these guys popping around Massachusetts, especially during the good months, warm weather months, and they're all talking about, hey, did you see him? He was in the coffee shop this morning. I seen a guy get $20. He's handing out these little litter bags and things. They're very colorful. Stuff like that gets people talking because kids don't miss a trick. So you save a generation. You won't see the investment pay off until later on. But just like Smokey the Bear and Uncle Sam pointing his finger at you and Smokey saying, hey, don't come running into my woods. You got to stop some fires. Get this in the public consciousness. Maybe, I don't know, maybe the Biden administration, they're going green all the time with money and everything. Why don't they go green and back up something like this if a state takes that initiative and has an icon or a national icon? Larry the Litter Bug or Linda the Litter Bug or the Litter Bug family. And they hand out a little bit of incentives here and there. At the same time, it's in the children's consciousness, and it's up to them when they become adults to carry that program on. Because you need things like this to get the attention, to get kids looking at something positive and say, you know, this is pretty good. I'm looking for this guy. I hear he's in New Bedford. You know, they announced we'll be in Bristol County this week or this or that, Larry Littlebug. And
you know, you did it again. You did Larry, but this time you didn't say Linda. And I'm wondering if the LGBTQ plus police come out, if you might need to change that to Lynn Litterbug. That way it can go either way.
Linda's Larry, and Larry is she, and this is that, and her and she owns the Hershey Company, chocolate bar company, not the vanilla chocolate bar company, and on and on it goes. But I would suggest that we open this up at the Olympics or at the next All-Star game, or maybe we can do this at the Trump trials. Don't throw litter here. Don't cast your votes on the ground. But we got to get it in the public consciousness for the kids. Nothing to do with the adults. They're going to throw nip bottles till they die. And it's as simple, and drive junk cars and everything else, and fancy cars with air conditioning and heated seats. We got to about ban some of that stuff, too. Don't make driving too comfortable. You get killed.
It sounds complicated already, but a good idea. I do appreciate it. 508-996-0500. He used the term, investment in stating that this generation is lost, but the next generation coming up, that's what politicians are always talking about. Their investment. When they take your tax dollars, they are investing. Senator Rodericks, I did hear a little bit of him on with Marcus and Chris today. And the subject of the school lunch program came up, and the fact that your tax dollars will now be funding permanent school lunch, and I do believe school breakfast. It doesn't matter whether or not you come from a family where you can have breakfast at home. You still will be able to go to school to get breakfast. And I get it. I think it was Chris that mentioned to the senator, we don't want any kid to go hungry. And I get it. I do. I don't mean to be a pain in the royal rump here. But at the same time, let's just use the scale of 100. And of that 100, you have 20% that need to be on the school breakfast program. So that would be 20 people out of 100. And then, of course, you've got your waste, fraud, and abuse. Let's say that's another 5% just for the, I'm going to even boost it up. Let's say it's 15%, because here in the Commonwealth, things could get out of control. So now all of a sudden, that's 35 out of every 100. Well, if you had to, and I do emphasize, if you had to, wouldn't you rather pay for the 35% than all 100%? Even mediocre, I got to tell you, I'm going to count on you guys to get us in less than 3 minutes. Hello.
Hey, really quick, you were talking about Massachusetts being one of the most expensive states to live in.
Yes.
It comes in at number 3.
Number 3?
Yep.
Okay.
So it's the top 3 most expensive place to live.
California and New Jersey, the other 2 states? No, and Hawaii.
So.
In Hawaii.
Yes.
Yeah.
And another thing, John Mitchell is running again, and he vetoed rent control twice. And people are complaining about the rents and stuff, but nobody's really doing anything about it. 50 people turned up at City Hall. Only 50 people turned up.
Well, I think just to let you go on that, and we can talk about it again during hour number 3, I think that tells us how many people really want something like rent control. Hello, bring me home.
Hey, Big Daddy.
Hey.
Brian, you mentioned, percentage, maybe 20% that's needed, and then there's the fraud and everything on the school meals. How about another percentage of the things prior to the Great Society, and certainly prior to the New Deal? That percentage of things that we used to assume were our own responsibilities that the government is slowly eating away at, is to include now feeding us. I mean, have we become dependent on government?
Yeah, government thinks that they are necessary in order for us to exist.
Scary thought.
Well, that's what happens when folks keep on electing the same people into office. That's just one of the problems.
Yeah. All right, Brian, you have a great afternoon. Good to hear you in the middle of the week.
Thank you. I appreciate it. 508-9960-500. Yeah, here's what happens. And you don't have to believe me. You can ask any of the politicians if they're willing to answer this question. What happens is people go out and get a lobbyist. The lobbyist is registered in the Commonwealth to lobby on behalf of, you name the group. Could be Planned Parenthood. It could be the Teachers Association. You name it. And they go up to Beacon Hill and they lobby. Not only do they lobby, but then they turn around and they write the bills for the lawmakers to actually present. And then from there, they go and they vote on it.